Everyone for joining us this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. We're just going to give it a few minutes to let some more people in. In the meantime, I can introduce myself. I'm John Smolensky. I'm the founder for Sovereign Canada. We are an independent liquor agency in Canada that manages a whole bunch of different really bartender fun time independent brands in Canada as well across the country. We're really privileged and honored to have Pete Nevenglosky from one of the co-founders from Avuá Cachaça, as well as Carol Gutierres, all the way down in Brazil, in Rio De Janeiro, from Stutzi Gastrobar, joining us today for Spirited Sessions, which is wonderful. We always like the ones where we can hear from other people around the world, and it's wonderful that Carol is joining us, and we thank her very much for her time. Pete, I'll throw it over to you if you want to introduce yourself and also talk a moment about Tiki by the Sea as well, and what's happening there, because I know there was a few Canadians that won a cocktail competition earlier in the year, and unfortunately that was delayed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Great to be a part of this. Appreciate you guys doing this, for the industry, I think. But a little background on me. So I am co-founder of Avuá Cachaça, as well as an aquavit that we just launched we call Svol, which we make in Brooklyn. Really cool project. And that's all under the umbrella of a company we call Drifter Spirits. So it's really about working with products that have geographic identity, history, really high quality, aimed at the bar, whether it's at your bar or at the home bar or what have you. And so we plan to continue to be finding, building, and representing great products as we kind of go through this journey. Specifically with regard to Tiki by the Sea, I started the event about, I guess now 6 years ago, kind of on the fly. So my parents own a motel in this weird town in New Jersey called Wildwood, which is effectively like, it's almost like a museum frozen in time. And so 50s, 60s, Americana, all this stuff. And so we kind of just brought some bartender friends down from New York, had a bunch of really rad speakers, including Sasha Petrosky and Brother Cleve and these people, and everybody loved it, and we decided we better keep doing it. So this is our 6th year. Unfortunately, due to pandemic, we can't do it in person. We usually do it in June in New Jersey. We intended to hopefully do it in September. So with regard to the main event, the hope, knock on wood, is that this comes back in June in its usual time period. Everybody who has been accepted will be anniversaried, assuming they still qualify. So, we're hopeful and excited that we get back to doing what we love and experiencing this learning aspect in this really unique environment. What we are also doing, since you guys are here in the digital universe with us, we're doing something called Tiki Tuesday Talks, which is every Tuesday at 3 Eastern. So every Tuesday, 3 Eastern, whole host of different topics. The one tomorrow is with Claire Sprouse, talking about why Tiki must go green. So awesome Brooklyn bar owner, super knowledgeable person. The one after that, we're going to have Gunnar Gislason, Michelin star chef who owns Dill in Iceland, who worked with us on building actually the botanical build for Svol. So anyway, we'd love to see you guys all there. That is on a platform called Zavi and kicks out to a number of different places. So
I forgot one thing, Pete. I just want to jump in for 1 second. Last Tuesday on Tiki Talks, you guys had Kelsey Ramage on. So
yes.
I want to take the opportunity, since we're recording this and it's going onto the internet forever, to congratulate Kelsey Ramage on winning International Bartender of the Year from Tales of the Cocktail. Not only is she a great friend, but she's an incredible human. Her acceptance speech was very, very moving. Circling back to conversations about having so much privilege and so much opportunity, and making sure that we're sharing that with others. Little Maple Leaf Pride, she is the very first Canadian to ever receive a Tales of the Cocktail Spirited Award. And we had 2 Canadians, actually, herself and Caitlin Stewart, another wonderful human being, who were finalists this year. So awesome. You guys know how to pick them on Zavi's, but I had to sneak in a little Canadian content.
I'm not going to say we had anything to do with it, but just kidding. No, she was super rad. Really stoked to have her. The content we've been really happy with, touching on cultural issues, sustainability issues, tiki history, rum histories. It's been super fun. But yeah, that was literally like the most fun science class I've been through in quite a while. So very cool content. It's all on our Facebook and YouTube if you guys want to check out video of that session. Yeah, she's brilliant, and it's worked her way up, put an incredible amount of work into her craft, honed her craft, and she earned it. And wow, yeah, I mean, I think this whole country is over the moon that we're finally getting a voice. This little country that has this little big country, I guess, a small community of 30 million, 35 million people or so, and always proud of our own. So right cheers. Yeah. So anyway, enough pontificating. I guess we should probably talk about cachaça. That's why we're here, right? And Carol, do you want to maybe take a moment to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Carol. I work at Stuzy. It's a charming, small Italian restaurant, a bar in Leblon. And we were elected last year as the best bar in Rio and the best menu cocktail. So
that's awesome.
It's a great place. Yeah.
It's a great spot.
Yeah. See, everything we touch turns to gold, right? That's just keep it that way. That's awesome. Carol, congratulations. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, taking some time, and really excited. But yeah, Pete, yeah, I guess I'll let you kick things off. And again, just to reiterate in the chat, this is a time to get super nerdy about cachaça and try and stump Pete along the way, and try and stump Carol. And I might try and throw a couple questions in there to stump them as well. But if there's anything that you ever wanted to know about cachaça, now's the time. So, but let's take an overview first. Take us on a tour, my friend.
I'll do my best. If I don't have an answer, I'll work to get one for you guys. And and what you could feel good about with this content is that basically we stole it from Dave Wondrich, who presented this for us a couple times. So if you take issue with anything, please email Dave. I'm sure he'll have a nice response for you, an explanation. But anyway,
he'll get back to you in record time too.
Yeah, you'll get an email that says he's not going to get back to you in record time. Yeah. But I mean, just I guess 1 second on that is we had him present something for us. It must have been 6 years ago now. And it was amazing. I mean, there is a reason that he is who he is, right? Yeah. Like, we've been down there. We tasted thousands of cachaças, right? We've read whatever we could. And this guy who knows no Portuguese, and I know very little, but he knows none, managed to dig up this stream of history that was just fantastic. So anyway, we'll take it away with that. Again, yeah, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, stump me if you must.
Well, according to him, I've had a conversation with him before. He actually thinks cachaça it could possibly be 5 to 10 years the next big thing in export markets, and we're about to find out why, because I think there's a tremendous amount of permutations about the category that we're only starting to scratch the surface on.
Totally. Well, humbling to hear that, but either way, excited to kind of like give our slice of this story and interpret it there. And again, this is simply our experience and what we've learned from what's there, this is a 500-year-old tradition. So saying that we know it all is an absurdity unto itself, but we'll do our best here to kind of break it down. This photo, just as a quick aside, was actually from our launch. We launched a brand at Milk and Honey when Sasha moved the space to 23rd Street. So it was literally construction zone. We signed this bar. This bar was only there maybe 9 months before they bought the building, unfortunately, and was never again. But just really amazing moment, some special moment that we had, and were able to kind of introduce this thing to people in a really compelling way. That was more chance than anything. But anyway, so first of all, I want to kind of reframe the conversation of cane. I think there is kind of these two camps, right? And as an outsider, we can look at it and say, this is a sugarcane spirit, right? There's cachaça, there's rum, they're all sugarcane spirits. There's shared traditions, there's differences. And so what we really want to say is, the more you understand all these individual nuanced country traditions, distillation techniques, base materials, the better you are. And so we want to kind of bring that context back to help you guys understand, as bar professionals or rum enthusiasts or what have you, how does cachaça fit in? How is it similar? How is it different? And really, I mean, you could build programs upon all the nuance and difference within the sugarcane spirit category. So much like people talk about agave as a base material and the nuances and differences between tequila and mezcal and sotol, et cetera, we want to have that conversation about cane. And, you know, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily want to have the conversation in that wide view, but we're going to do it anyway. Screw it. So first of all, where does cane come from? So cane originates in Southeast Asia. It's indigenous to Southeast Asia. It is not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere at all, although it's obviously well suited. So migrates over to Africa, and then colonialism, and we talked about colonialism before, but unfortunately we have to talk a lot about colonialism with regard to this whole history and what's happened here. Colonial powers brought cane to the New World. In fact, Christopher Columbus brought cane over in 1492. So it's well suited and adapted to much of Central and South America, but not indigenous. So first of all, the traditions we're talking about really old traditions in Brazil, but they still pale in comparison to earliest evidence. So 2nd century BC, there's some evidence, not super clear, about cane distillation going on in India. By 1300s, there's definitive evidence of sugarcane distillation specifically. So 1300s now, we're still 200 years before what we're going to speak about in Brazil, which is still ahead of the earliest records that we have of other sugarcane spirits in the Western Hemisphere. 1400 to 1500s, Europeans discovered people drinking many forms of distilled sugarcane in places like Indonesia, et cetera. So again, we're still over in Southeast Asia. 1493, as I mentioned, Christopher Columbus brings cane to the Americas. By the early 1500s, the Portuguese do the same, right? So Brazil as a Portuguese colony, extremely important to the history and evolution of cachaça in general. And really, the way the interaction and legalities and perception that the colonial powers applied to these places had a lot to do with how these industries started, and even perceptions today. So early 1500s, sugarcane comes. Very rapidly thereafter, the first distillation begins. There's some anecdotal evidence of 1516 even. So we're talking about over 500 years of production of cachaça. 1536, there's a gentleman named Erasmus Schetz, clearly not a Portuguese name, establishes the first commercial distillery in Brazil as part of a sugarcane refinery. So early days, it's most likely, although we don't know for sure, that cachaça wasn't simply a cane distillate as it is now. It may have been a hybrid of pot distilled molasses and cane together, right? Just what you have as byproducts, what are you producing? So it starts, it's like formal commercial distillation, 1536. Erasmus Schetz is Dutch. So the Dutch were really kind of key mercantilists. They brought a lot of technology to many different places. They were really big commercial tradesmen. So they didn't have as much in terms of land holdings, but they had a heavy influence in terms of evolution of technology across a lot of the Western Hemisphere. So by 1585, there's 192 operating stills. So it's taking off, right? 1629, there's 349. So rapid evolution. It's kind of one of these things that what was coming in terms of alcoholic distillates into Brazil was largely bagaceiro, so kind of like it's like a kind of a cheap brandy element that, again, you're putting things on ships, they're sailing all the way over, a product that's maybe not of extremely high quality even as it leaves the port, then degrades as you go. So even rudimentary cachaça production at this early stage is superior to what's coming in at that time from the homeland, if you will. Feel free to interrupt me, John.
And yeah, well, I mean, there's just one thing, you know, and you know, I saw there's some new people joined in, and I just want to reiterate, right? I think it's important anytime that we're talking, and we see that photo there. I think it's important anytime that we're talking about sugarcane spirits to remember that, you know, they were built on the backs of black and brown bodies and slave labor, and cachaça is not different. Cachaça is not different. And so as we learn about the timeline, you know, obviously we could go on and on for hours, and it's almost a different seminar, and we want to be, you know, we want to hear later on from Carol about what's happening in Brazil. But I just thought I wanted to drive that point home, because I think it's almost a social responsibility to make sure we're understanding that. And you know, there's a lot of information that's out there, you know, about that. You can go look at some of Gimme Brown's old seminar stuff on that topic. But I just wanted to be sure that we were driving that home, especially for the newcomers here. But yeah, continue on for sure.
I mean, again, you can't really disassociate the colonial relationship with the slave trade with sugarcane distillation. Macro, it's endemically, intrinsically connected. And so cachaça really started as something to give the workers, right? It was like a thing that could be easily made of reasonable quality. Sugar was prevalent. It was growing very quickly. And the slave trade was a huge business in Brazil, actually bigger than the US. And so there's a massive interconnection between the slavery triangle, cachaça production, and we'll see actually what happens when that's kind of broken in a little bit. But yeah, absolutely. And honestly, to this day, perceptions of the category are strongly related, I would say, to what was happening at this time and who this was made for at this time. All right, I don't know why this keeps doing that. So early 1600s in Pernambuco, so this is the northern part of Brazil, the Dutch are effectively kicked out by the Portuguese. They head to the Caribbean and they head to Barbados. So the Dutch land in Barbados, early 1600s, they're bringing distillation technology. It's pot distillation, which was what was done of the era. They're using now molasses decidedly. So this is the earliest of like the English style, if you will. So heavy pot still, heavy molasses, often aged production, which is the Dutch creating it in Barbados, most likely the Dutch who were kind of booted out of Brazil. So again, it stands to reason that a lot of that early production of what was to eventually become cachaça, one, it's pot distillation. It probably was a hybrid of molasses and cane, but it was really brought by that technology. So as you can see, these are all interconnected. You can argue the nuances of stylistic approaches and what have you, and you know, there's kind of no end to that rabbit hole, but effectively, this is technology brought from Europe, applied to a product that didn't come from here, but was adapted really well.
And from an anthropological standpoint, I mean, if you just look at the timeline here, you know, important thing to take away is that cachaça preceded Caribbean rum for the most part.
by about 100 years, you know, more or less, right? So yeah, it's interesting when you have a conversation about Caribbean rum and you don't have a conversation about cachaça, or you talk about the first rum made, right? So that to me is what's so perplexing about using these terms. Cachaça has its own deep tradition in Brazil and represents its own thing with its own rules. But talking about sugarcane distillation in the Western Hemisphere without talking about cachaça makes no sense, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So important thing happens mid-1800s technologically. One of the really important factors of sugarcane growth in the New World is to produce sugar for Europe, right? So cane doesn't grow because of the climate, et cetera, in Europe. That was the way of making sugar at the time. Mid-1800s, the technology is developed in Europe to create sugar out of beets. And so that reduces reliance on the Western Hemisphere and the colonies in order to produce sugar. Therefore, you have tons of cane. You're not producing as much sugar. The byproduct of sugar production is molasses, which what makes it so sensical to make rum out of molasses. It is delicious, but it's because you have extra, right? And you can use it as such. So instead of creating molasses to then distill it, effectively the practice of cutting, pressing, fermenting, distilling cane juice comes to the forefront. So the agricole style becomes the most preeminent style in the mid to late 1800s, which is, as you know it today, I'm sure, it's cut, pressed, fermented, distilled cane, typically from Martinique, but also Guadeloupe, Haiti, et cetera. The style of distillation is a little different. This is driven by column distillation. It's coming off at a higher proof. It's different cane, it's different soil, it's different, et cetera. And one thing to really note with cane distillates, so cut, pressed, fermented, distilled cane, is there's a huge element of terroir. There are thousands of types of cane. Soil, air, et cetera, plays a huge impact. I mean, we were amazed in how different a cachaça made 2 hours away can be even. So imagine a different fucking continent, right? It's amazing. So French style really comes to bear at this time. The last style, which is now the most ubiquitous, is the Spanish style, right? Or this kind of like column, very light, sometimes aged, and then filtered, kind of born out of the sherry style production, most commonly associated with Bacardi. So this is in Cuba, late 1800s. The Spanish effectively had banned the production of distillates in their colonies, ostensibly because of religion, but most likely had more to do with an obsession with gold and silver. So what I like to do here is just really to kind of spark an insight, and it's typically not with the bartender universe, but more with the consumer universe of like how diverse sugarcane spirits are, even just in the Western Hemisphere, in this small little area, in terms of traditions, profiles, the way it comes across, et cetera. So that's like a really high overview. To your point, John, I mean, each one of these elements could be a seminar unto itself, but just for some context as to what's going on with kind of Western Hemisphere rum production.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much to know, and you know, I can already tell like we're gonna bleed into overtime, which is fine. But just another thing to point out: a lot of spirit gurus are trying to you know, move away from the terms English style, French style, Spanish style, Portuguese, Dutch style. I think they actually do serve a little bit of purpose from a context standpoint, especially when you're having these sorts of conversations with guests across the bar. And I think, you know, in order for the entire category to grow, unfortunately or fortunately, you know, you have to put some labels and put things into boxes, and that's just a way that we learn. But by no means are there any, you know, are French, you know, French influenced islands 100% making, you know, agricole style spirits. You know, it's not a final and firm thing that's happening, but it is a useful learning tool.
Exactly. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about this, and there are a ton of opinions on it. And I think if you are fully able to go all the way down the rabbit hole, and you have the time and attention and interest to do it, then these styles are maybe, you know, a little too simplistic, and they're, you know, they certainly don't cover everything. They're certainly not myopic. You know, I had a conversation with Matt Petrick about this, and the reality is, I don't know that there's something better to help people understand the categories and the nuance, at least at a very top level at this point. I'm open-minded and interested about that. Certainly going beyond gold, et cetera, but yeah, obviously there's tons of nuance. This doesn't apply holistically to everything, but it does allow you to kind of understand, at least from a timeline perspective. I mean, these were colonies. There were laws and directives from colonial powers that influenced the way that these categories evolved. So I think it's an interesting conversation. By no means is this the only way that these things are produced. It's challenging to really interpret a lot of this. A lot of this information is secondary. It's hearsay. It's from a letter from some guy to another guy, or what have you, right? But I think it's important to kind of understand at least where the traditions kind of started from a baseline perspective.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So Cachaça, this is Cachaça Museum. As you can tell, there's a lot of bottles here. There are thousands of types of cachaça. We'll get into the nuance of difference here. I tried to kill this animation. Hopefully this works here. Cool. So as we talked about, cane, cash crop, distillation begins almost immediately, 1516. There were many names for cachaça. Originally wasn't called cachaça per se. I think Wondrich came up with hundreds, but really reference any beverage made from sugarcane product or byproduct of that at the time. This is the start here. It's largely consumed by working class and slaves within Brazil. So the Portuguese elite preferred imported spirits and wine. And this is kind of what I referenced, that to your point, John, there's still a perception problem in Brazil with cachaça. I'll let Carol talk more about it because she's living it every day. But it's amazing to see a bottle of, let's not use names, but a really mediocre vodka made in the United States sold for 2 times the price of an extremely fantastic, really nuanced aged cachaça, right? It just gives you an indicator of value perception and how that's done. So literally these things that are happening 500 years ago, that perception still exists today, I would say.
Carol, do you want to jump in? And I saw you unmuted yourself. Do you want to jump in and elaborate just a little bit about how that...
There is still a problem about cachaça in Brazil in general, because happens with vodka or gin or heavy spirits. We don't value what we have. We have a very good product, and we just don't give much of attention to it.
Would you say that that's an I mean, can you confirm in a sense what Pete is saying? Would you say that's an institutional thing? It's kind of an archaic, broken way of thinking?
Yes, truly, yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
No. Well, it's a good thing that we have people like you. The world is probably thankful for people like you who's so going to, try and change those perceptions and destigmatize.
Yeah. It's not to say that there aren't those people out there making that change, and I do think it's starting to happen in places like Sao Paulo and Rio, and there are people who are really passionate about it, who understand it and want to get that word out, but like from a more blanket, again, making blanket statements of understanding, there definitely seems to be a perception of, if something's from somewhere else, it's better.
Yeah, I mean, Canadian whiskey, even, obviously the context and the syntax are totally different, but Canadian whiskey has suffered through the same thing. It's taken us a long time to realize that we do have the ability to make good whiskey in this country. So yeah, it's important, and that's why we have these conversations, right? It's important to destigmatize, because I think from the outside looking in, one would easily assume that cachaça is something, because you look at the numbers, cachaça is one of the largest consumed spirits in the world, and most of that happens in Brazil. You would think that there's this intrinsic culture of drinking cachaça that exists within Brazil, but that's not necessarily the case, and even at that point, it's a bit segregated.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if we're going kind of deep on it. There's certainly like kind of an old guard of aficionados of older crew who really loves craft cachaça before it was called craft, right? Like, and they collect bottles and they understand the nuance. And then there's kind of a newer group of bartenders who are passionate and understanding, wanted to play with it and get the word out on it. It's certainly consumed in massive quantities, typical in caipirinhas, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy breezy. Its quality is not often a concern. But when we talk about people who are more traveled or more interested, I think there's still a huge way to go in terms of understanding how amazing this category is, and kind of like not understanding what you have, you know, in your own backyard, if you will.
Yeah.
So anyway, mid 1600s, Brazilian colonials began shipping cachaça to Africa to purchase slaves. So triangle, right? Now you've cut out the progenitor of the triangle, the Portuguese. Obviously that pisses them off, right? So now it's effectively, you're creating a product in Brazil and trading it directly for slaves. That leads to the first revolt in the Western Hemisphere that's been documented, against this kind of taxation that's applied to and banning that's applied to cachaça. So cachaça in like the early mid 1600s really becomes the spirit of Brazil. As it's evolving, much of the production is along the coast, right? And much of the development was initially along the coast. In particular, there's this town called Paraty here. So beautiful, amazing. It's in Rio State, about 4 hours from the city, colonial town, with a deep tradition of cachaça production. I would highly encourage anybody to go check it out. It's a really interesting place. Very good cachaça made there. And in particular, they were often making product. So down in the bottom here, making product for this booming mining area called Minas Gerais. So when you have miners who have money and nothing to do, what do they want to do? Drink, right? So basically, this is a 200-mile trek back before we had interstates, right? And so they would put cachaça on ox carts, put the cachaça in French oak barrels, which is simply the thing that everything was transported in the time, and bring it in to Minas Gerais. And so that would take months. And there was a realization that imparted a unique flavor profile to the cachaça and was really interesting. So this was kind of the start of the tradition of aging cachaça by happenstance, which I imagine is probably true of many spirits.
Whiskey for sure.
Yeah, totally. You know, and, you know, so French oak, this is what we had. There's a deep trading relationship with the French. And what's different about Brazil is, one, the availability of a wide variety of woods and things, and two, is just a mentality of experimentation, which is very different from like the French mentality of this is how you do it, right? So we'll get into how that evolved, but this is really the start. And there's, interestingly, at least if you talk to, you know, the cachaça aficionados, there still seems to be a preference in the coastal areas for unaged cachaça, and certainly in places like Minas Gerais, almost everything you encounter is aged. Like that's the deep tradition. That's what's really consumed in these areas.
Carol, can you know, what's your perspective on that? Is that, you know, anecdotally speaking, do you see it the same way?
Yeah.
They
don't drink. They don't drink. I think they prefer some kind of fresh cachaça because they are very fresh, and they don't. Some people, they don't like the aged one.
Is that changing though? You know, is there a movement for you know, a little differentiation and refinement, I suppose?
I don't think so. Well, not here, not in Rio, not in Rio.
Yeah, I guess from experiencing a few places, I'd say I see it. Minas is a home to this. I've seen it more in Sao Paulo, in terms of some places where, and particularly driven by chefs. So Alex Atala and Rodrigo and the guys from Jiquitaya. So the kind of like this idea of amazing natural flavors of flora, fauna, et cetera, in Brazil, and how that relates to a beverage program that's more oriented towards a diversity of cachaça. So I think there's a handful of places that are doing that, more oriented in Sao Paulo than maybe in Rio.
That's fascinating, actually, because you know, there are many routes to quality craft cocktails and quality independent spirits, and that's one of them. And it's just to draw a parallel, that's more or less what happened in Canada, where so much of the cocktail scene and so much of the willingness to explore and check out new spirits really did come from the fine dining and restaurant level down. And there was a tremendous influence of, you know, not just chefs, but bartenders and beverage directors going back into the kitchen and understanding how flavor works. So that's really interesting. And I think that's the one that has staying power too, right? Because, you know, it's not just a trend; it's almost more of an enlightenment.
Totally.
I see Alan actually has a fantastic question. Is there a large cooperage tradition in Brazil?
Yeah, for sure. So we'll get into some of these crazy woods and what they look like and all that. But there's a tradition of traveling coopers, because a lot of the barrels that are produced, not French oak per se, but the others, they're large barrels. They're large vertical barrels, 1, 3, 5,000 liters even. And so you're not transporting these per se. You're actually building them, servicing them, et cetera, at the distillery. So when we want to do something, it's kind of like, oh, the guy's got to drive 8 hours from BH to get here, and like he'll probably be here. He can maybe make some time in like November, December, but we'll see. You know, like it's
mañana. Well, it's not, that's Spanish, not Portuguese, but
it's the same mentality.
It's a cultural thing for sure.
What's that, Carol?
Just to point out, before the pandemic, I was living in Sao Paulo, and the nightlife and the culture about going to a nice fine restaurant and a nice fine bar is totally different than in Rio. I think Rio, it's more of a beer place, it's more informal, and Sao Paulo is totally different. So the culture of drinking, it's totally different.
Yeah, Rio's a lot more casual.
Very casual.
Places that, like Stutzi, places like that, they're institutions, and people love it, and they go and they know what they're going to get, and they go for that, I think, to a large degree. And in Sao Paulo, it's a lot more of a New York, London vibe, right?
Style, yeah.
Yeah, more progressive, more kind of formal. I think what's going to be interesting, John, and again, the pandemic notwithstanding, who knows really now, but I don't know if I could talk about it specifically, but there's a couple very renowned chefs who are making plans to open in the US. And I think it could be really important for the exportation of amazing Brazilian flavors, holistically, right? Food, you know, ingredients, drinks, cachaça. So we're really excited about that. I think that what's been unfortunate also on the culinary side is there's really only been a couple of styles of Brazilian cuisine that have really made it pretty far out. One being the steakhouses, right? Yeah. And the other being really casual, like we would call it boteco, right? And there's nothing wrong with either of those things. They are intrinsically there, but a lot of the more kind of nuanced flavors and different traditions, this is a country 2/3 the size of the US, right? Yeah. With massive diversity of backgrounds that have come together, they've created styles. The North and the South, the food is incredibly different. So people in the rest of the world, unless you've been down there and made some very specific choices about where you've gone, haven't really had the opportunity to experience a lot of these things. So I think rant over, you know, the culinary tradition, like, definitely is really, really important for people to understand Brazilian flavors, and goes hand in hand with this amazing tradition of cachaça production.
Yeah, and to add on that, I mean, there's precedence to that, especially in North America, of food being the gateway. Even back to the 1850s and Peru, and the influence that Peruvian pisco and Peruvian cuisine had on Western United States during the gold rush, and with that came Peruvian pisco cocktails. And in some sense, we're sort of seeing it right now with mezcal as well, where there's this understanding that Oaxacan cuisine is quite unique and far different than other parts of Mexico.
100%.
And with that, it's been easier to engage with guests about mezcal. So, understanding that there's differences in diversity within cuisine in a country means that you're set up to understand that there's differences in diversity within the spirit categories as well.
Absolutely. So late 19th century, early 20th, coffee is now replacing sugar as Brazil's main cash crop. Cane juice replaces molasses. We talked about beet sugar production. So now we know cachaça really becomes cachaça as we know it today. Cut, pressed, fermented, distilled cane juice. Today, there are over 5,000 legitimate brands, meaning the government has approved their label, et cetera, they can produce. And then countless more rural producers who are making effectively unlabeled stuff for their family at the holidays, right? I've heard numbers as high as 40,000 individual, distilleries of any kind of size, right? Making about 1 billion liters of cachaça every year. So massive, massive production. In terms of, there's a couple key distinctions in cachaça. And I guess I'll mention, because I didn't have it up here, cachaça by definition, appellation of Brazil must be made there. It's from cut, pressed, fermented, distilled cane juice, between 38 and 48% ABV. So if it's not that, it would be called aguardiente. And that is something that exists. And you can find some effectively cachaças at like 51% or lower or what have you that are really delicious, technically not cachaça.
Well, it needs to be 48. Sorry, it's a max of 48%, right?
38 to 48%.
Yeah, by law, right? Yeah.
By law, right. Now, I mean, you can make it. And again, there's a brand that comes to my mind. I think it's 51%. And it's delicious. And I know somebody who used it as their well for caipirinhas, right? And it's called an aguardiente, right? Effectively made the same way. It's just a different distillation.
Yeah, cachaça has some sneaky, sneakily, I guess. So I guess people don't really know, but the production regulations are actually strict. But I don't think a lot of people know that because they're just accustomed to having industrial cachaça. It's always an interesting conversation, almost a tangent when you start talking about appellations and how there's, on one hand there's a political side to it, but also it's a bit out of date and it's a bit antiquated on some levels. How much of that is actually enforced? You talked a little bit about illegitimate operations. Right. Is there an enforcement body?
Yeah.
And second part to the question, Carol, is that something that cachaça drinkers are interested in knowing, I guess, within Brazil? Because a lot of that stuff has to, the catalyst for it or the inception point for it is locally.
Well, I'll take the first. So one last piece is you can include up to 6 grams per liter post-distillation of sugar or added element. We don't include any. So that's like the main crux of the definition. In terms of enforcement, those who are officially running through channels and doing it with a MAPA number, et cetera, there's actually a high level of enforcement. There's testing of product at labs, et cetera. That said, there's effectively almost no enforcement of anything that's happening outside of that, right? I don't think there's the interest, ability of the government to even regulate at that level, et cetera. So, but I'll let Carol kind of talk about the cachaça scene a little more for the second part of your question.
That is exactly what happened because they are very strict about producing cachaça, but they make it very difficult for us to buy the cachaça. It's very expensive for us to buy. It's even cheaper for me to buy as a restaurant. It's cheaper for me to buy a beverage from another place in the world than to buy my own cachaça. It's very, very expensive for us.
Heavy taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the taxes.
Yep.
Is production taxes.
State by state
Yes.
taxes that are applied on top, and you know, it's extremely complicated.
Yeah.
Taxation of regulatory environment.
Is there
Yes,
is there a,
for production, and for each state they have a very different
wow.
type of tax. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, someone just asked that. So does that drive a black market? Is that one of the reasons why? Is there social acceptance almost of illegitimate operations for that reason?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just, even for if you are drinking a very expensive cachaça, people will look to like, you don't know what you're drinking. It's not a very good beverage, so it's very strange.
I think, John, probably for sure, if you're making a very small production and it's more just to kind of keep a legacy going, it's not worth it.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
What happened? Are we getting Zoom bombed? That's no fun. The security settings wrong. Anyway.
So I think that's probably part of it. The other part that all these crazy laws state by state, which it's really not that different from the US or Canada, but it's more exacerbated at the level of the pricing, is that you find a lot of regionality. So many brands, even quality brands, might be in a couple states. Predominantly, their sales will be in the state that they produce in, and then maybe it gets a little bit further, but there's very few brands at the artisanal level that you find across the country. Really, very, very few.
Yeah, I feel like I have more questions, but we're going to take up too much time. Let's keep moving. Let's save it for the end.
All right. So industrial versus artisanal, this is not by regulation, right? So now we're talking about just stylistic difference. And you mentioned politics, and politics has a lot to do with why the definition stops at a certain point, why there are no kind of like DOs within, if you will, or what have you, because the biggest players produce industrial cachaça. They produce tons and tons of it, and they obviously have a lot of influence at the governmental level, right? So it's probably not unlike many other things. Industrial cachaça, you're burning the fields to clear them because it's more efficient. You press the cane kind of whenever you get to it. You're doing such large quantities. And then you're running through massive column stills. You could see one here, right? Like multi-story column stills. So you're making it very efficiently. This is stuff you can buy at the store for like $2 a liter retail at the store.
Or right? 35 in Canada.
There you go. So you might as well fly to Brazil, buy it, and bring it back.
And probably 100 here in Brazil.
Oh, yeah. That's, again, a different seminar.
Yeah. So anyway, very mass-produced product. And this is the first stuff to make it to the US, I assume Canada as well. It's like P2, 51, Ipioca. Artisanal cachaça, you're machete chopping the cane. You're pressing it within 24 hours. We do it in 12. And you're running it through alembic pot stills. So batch production, you're getting a lot more of the character of what's going on there. There's a lot more attention to it. It's a lot less efficient, right? So huge difference there. The other main difference is the aging. So we mentioned mezcal. I think the analogies to mezcal are really resonant here, right? You're talking about a category that's only now getting discovered with this amazing tradition. And it's really being made the same way as it was made 400 years ago, right? So within mezcal, you've got different agaves. We have different woods. So as we mentioned, there's 30 plus types of wood that cachaça is aged in. This is actually an Amburana barrel right here. So we talked about the cooperaging. That's decades old barrel. We reuse it. We sand it down, open it up, no toasting, no charring. But there's this kind of tradition. I imagine it started with, well, the French oak was good. Let's just try this other stuff kind of mentality. And then some things really worked. I imagine others did not. And then there came a tradition and there came regulations on that, et cetera. within that, we kind of apply 3 different types, right? So storage woods, this has been largely replaced by stainless steel at this point, which is a bit more kind of consistent. But these would apply kind of little flavor, little color. They really allow kind of the esters to burn off and the juice to really become more solidified. Resinous woods, which is largely what we're using. This is Amburana, this is Balsamo, excuse the typo. These are effectively, you're kind of infusing the wood with the sap and the oils, infusing the spirit with the sap and the oils of the wood, right? There's no toasting, there's no charring. These tend to be larger barrels that impart kind of a unique flavor, not necessarily a ton of, you can see here, not a ton of color per se, because again, we're not toasting, we're not charring, and they're less surface area interaction. And then reactive oak is the most common of this. You're literally creating an oxidative impact by charring the barrel and creating a chemical compound interaction between the spirit and the distillate.
Just to, you know, storage woods is an important term because in Brazil there is actual DO differences that exist that demarcate whether it's aged or stored.
Right.
And so I thought it was important to point that out.
100%. Good point. Anything macro category before I talk a little bit about Avuá? any
other questions? Yeah. I mean, I got lots, but I'll try and keep only a couple because I do want to hear more from Carol. But
absolutely.
Commercially speaking, so like we teach people, we're talking about mezcal. You know, it's like, hey, you know, there's about 30 or so commercially available, you know, subspecies that are around that you might actually see in the market. From a cachaça standpoint, from the woods, how many different indigenous woods exist that are both commercially available and also environmentally sustainable, which is a whole, again, a different seminar, that you might possibly see. And is that a useful way for creating a taxonomy, if you would, for the premium part of the category?
Yeah, let's talk about official regulation, right? There are a number of woods that are acceptable use, meaning readily available, no concerns, etc. You do need to, with every barrel, you need a nota fiscal, you need to prove its origin, etc. Then there are kind of endangered woods that you can only use if you're reusing barrels, you can't create new barrels, etc. Right? So I think, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I'd say it's kind of like a half-half scenario on what's on which list. And then there's total no-no woods that you can use. I'd say that the most prominent thing is oak in the market. Behind that, Amburana and Balsamo tend to be prevalent, and then it kind of really tapers out from there. You know, one producer marked with one thing out there, right? We make Tapi Noir, for example, which it's the only reason we can make it is that our distiller father used to make it. We had a barrel that sat there for decades. We recommissioned that barrel and we produce in batches, you know, it's one 5,000 liter barrel that we get a batch out of and then we wait, right? So you'd find a couple few used by each artisanal producer that venture into that space. But there's probably, you know, a max of, you might find 4 or 5, unless you are truly at like a really deeply specialized cachaça bar or retailer.
Is that a regional thing as well?
Yeah, also regional, right? So everything is like very hyper focused. Even the style and type of the wood, I mean, there's subspecies, right? Yep. So there's a difference between Amburana from this place and Amburana from this place, right? All those things play into it.
So does that mean that there's possibly a pathway, you know, to draw a parallel from about mezcal for us to, you know, at some point be picking up the bottles and saying, you know, this is this kind of cane. It comes from, here's the terroir. It comes from this area. It's aged in this wood that's specific to the area, and it's distilled by this person.
Yeah, I think there is, to a large degree. I mean, the difference is there are thousands of types of cane. So it gets a little harder to really, it's not subspecies, it goes deeper than that. But yes, like where is it made? And what is the impact on the terroir there? What cane is it? Certainly. Who's distilling it? What is it aged in? And for us, I mean, honestly, as outsiders, we came in and said, this tradition is amazing. And it was a bit perplexing because if you look at a bottle of aged cachaça in Brazil, you'll know it's aged, but like the identifier for what it's aged in is an extremely small text. Like it's kind of a sub bullet, which is very weird because if you taste something aged in balsamo, you taste something aged in amburana, you taste something aged in oak, light years differ from each other, right? And I guess the connoisseurs know, right? They know Canarino, it's balsamo and it's delicious, but as a consumer, you really would have no idea unless you truly got deep, you know, into the bottle. So I think that's a little strange, honestly.
I mean, in some sense, it's the start, right? Like, you know, other niche categories went through a similar thing in the beginning, right? We just have to figure out and know what this is. So maybe in some sense that is jumping the shark.
I think it's great. Want to do it. Happy.
Yeah.
You're super transparent about everything we do. And I think the more that we can get people aligned to that idea, the better it is for the category.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how you move forward without transparency, especially on a, you know, if you have on the consumer level, right? If you want to have consumers willing to spend a little more, right? You have to kind of create that system in the first place. And that's really, really good for cachaça as a whole. And you can kind of circle back around on value later, which I think in some sense is one of the reasons why you're starting to see this split happening within rum, the rum category. But Carol, would you say, and I know working in Sao Paulo and working in Rio are obviously two extremely different environments. Would you say that you know, there are guests that are around that do want to have these, you know, different, you know, permutations or, you know, a variety that are in there seeking that? And then, you know, are there bars and restaurants in Brazil that cater to those sorts of guests?
Yeah, what happens is that a lot at the bar, the consumer, they see us as someone who knows about beverage and drinking and making drink. So they are always asking us, what can I buy to have at home? What is the best cachaça for me to have? So they don't know much. So you can probably know 5 to 10 people who knows about the cachaça, the woods, the difference between them. Not even me, I think. I don't have that much of knowledge.
We're going to work on that.
Yeah. I have one for me, which is my favorite. It's called sassafras. I think it's
really interesting.
awesome. They have some kind of spicy. For me, it's the best one, but it's not easy. It's not easy to find a bar with that kind of cachaça, and not even a place to buy that kind of cachaça. So it's a very specific one. I know because I work in a bar, but probably the final consumer, the ones at home, they don't know that.
Isn't that fascinating in a sense? Because it's like you see it time and time again with these niche categories where the export market itself is actually helping create awareness domestically, right? So it's really, really fascinating. One more question.
I'll tell you our producer Katya, so we work with the 3rd generation woman distiller. She's amazing. And when we first came, first of all, we must have looked ridiculous. It's just 2 dudes like strolling around Brazil, like no idea what we're doing. Luckily, we had some help from people who made some good introductions. But I don't even think she thought we wanted to bring in anything aged that she makes at all. Like she was amazed by that idea. And for us, we were like, especially we started with Prata and Amburana. The Amburana was just so unique, so different from anything else, and so fucking good. Even we were like, well, maybe it'll be 5% of the business. It's like a third of our business, you know? So it's really amazing. It kind of took somebody to maybe look at it differently and say, wow, this is insane, guys. You don't know what you're missing. And then we brought it to people who did things with it that we had no concept of what could be done with it, right? Like we're not bartenders, but like having Stasha's crew working on it, having the Death & Co guys, you know, having the Nomad crew, like creating really unique approaches and ways of thinking about this spirit that really nobody's made cocktails with effectively ever in any kind of creative manner, was really interesting. And I hope that that kind of creates an interesting dialogue back and forth, you know.
Yeah, Carol, is that, you know, well, I think one thing a lot of people want to know is, and I'm sure we'll get into it in a second, cocktail, from a cocktail standpoint, you know, we think of cachaça being used just for things like caipirinhas and bright and tropical and fruity. Is there an appetite for some of these more stirred down, spirit forward, creative cachaça cocktails within the Brazilian bar community? And does that bleed down to guests at all? Well, I guess I know the second part at this point, but.
Probably the bartenders are the one consuming it, not the final consumer.
But that's a good thing.
Unfortunately.
Good starting point.
Yeah.
Good starting point.
We're just making caipirinha with probably 100 types of fruits, strawberry, I don't know, melancia, they have a watermelon. So, but different cocktails, instead of just caipirinha, it's kind of difficult. Here in Rio, in special.
Yeah. One last question before we move on and pay some bills with Avuá. Authenticity. You know, you talked a little bit about illegitimate operations, and you know, that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. Is there a way to pick up a bottle of cachaça, any cachaça, and see on the label whether or not it has been compliant, it has been tested, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
I know you talked briefly about the term adoçado, which is the 6 grams of sugar thing. But you know, like a gnome or something like that to draw a parallel for Mexico.
It's a MAPA number. I don't know if we're going to be able to show that here in any relevant way, but at the very top there,
okay,
it says distilled and bottled by Fazenda da Quinta, 3rd district, CEP number, registered, you know, where it's registered, for export only, blah blah blah. All of that effectively says that we are officially registered with the government. We've tested our product. It's tested before it goes out, and we're documented. So if that's not, that needs to be on every label, even if it's sold in Canada, the US, or otherwise. So if you don't see that, then you would definitely question.
Oh, so it can't even be exported. It's part of an export certificate.
It's part of an, yeah, it's general brand and production and testing aligned around that. Gives you that, and you need it whether you're doing it domestically or not, and it's codified differently whether you're doing it domestically or
so does that mean that there's no pathway for like cachaças that fall outside of these sort of stricter regulations? You know, maybe a still strength that's 51% that might be bloody delicious, but you know, it's not, it doesn't, you know, you can't test it and it doesn't fall within regulations, so it can't be exported?
I think it could be exported, which just couldn't be listed as cachaça, but I actually don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's a huge fraud problem with mezcal and pisco for that reason. That's why I was asking. But anyway, we'll keep moving on.
All right, fair enough. So a little bit about our journey. So myself, my business partner Nate, who you referenced, you know, we traveled down 2011, and we tasted over 400 different cachaças. So a lot of cachaça, a lot of rice, bean, steak, getting lost in the middle of nowhere. Bartender friend of friend took us around for a week and drove us around. They introduced us to people, including Cachaca. So it was an amazing trip. We had no idea what we were doing, but we encountered so much diversity of product. We snuck 50 bottles back in a suitcase. 47 of those made it. Blind tasted those with bartender friends in New York and fell in love with this one produced here. So this is the distillery. It's called Da Quinta. It's about 4 hours outside of the city of Rio in a town called Carmo. Everything's grown here. On the right side, you guys will see the water wheel, the press, the fermentation, and the distillation. On the left side, bottling, labeling, aging, and resting. So everything is happening here, right? This is not a massive facility. They've been doing it basically the same way since 1923. And there was cachaça production here before, actually. We don't know a lot about it, but it was even happening before their family, like her grandfather, purchased the land. So, as mentioned, machete chopped, pressed within 12 hours. Mineral water flows down from those hills and powers that water wheel, which powers the crusher. The spent cane, the bagasse, fires the still, and the rest is gravity fed. So there's no electricity used in that process. It's airborne yeast fermented for 24 hours. And then it's single distilled in that alembic pot still. That's Katya right there. Amazing, super passionate. And so single distillation, one plate, really funky still. And then it's aged or rested. So rested in stainless or aged in some of those barrels over there you see of different types. And then everything is batch and bottle numbered. So there'll be nuances and differences between each batch. I don't know why I keep doing that. Brand itself kind of evokes 50s and 60s Rio. So kind of when the world discovered Brazil, the start of Bossa Nova, Copacabana Beach exploding. The package was inspired by an architect of that era and well beyond named Oscar Niemeyer. So it's kind of a really unique bottle design. We're really trying to reflect the culture, the place it's from, you know, and just bring something that's made truly impressively out there and get the word out. So this is the full range. The two on the left are unaged. Prata's at 84, still strength's at 90. So kind of pushing the boundaries. It's a different cut. We're folding in more of the high proof, high ester elements. And then the rest are aged all in different woods. We have a French oak aged, Amburana, which we mentioned, and then we have a number of others. So Jequitiba Hossa, Balsamo, Tapi Noir, of varying levels of kind of availability. We also are just putting this out. So it's a limited edition partnership that we did with MGM Resorts and Hardy Cognac. It's called Copan. So it's literally our Tapi Noir that's finished in wet Hardy Cognac barrels for 9 months. We made 600 bottles. We'll never be able to make it again. Would definitely get your hands on it if you can. Really, really rad. So with that, any other questions for me before I hand it off to Carol?
No, let's hand it off to Carol and save any questions for after, because I know we're running along. Carol, it's your turn.
Yeah, that's my bar in São Paulo. I used to work. It's called Terço. That picture was for probably a day, a good day of work. And I made 2 videos of 2 drinks made with cachaça. So I don't know which one has the video.
Yeah. Do you want to go through these? So this is your bar now, right?
This is my bar now. Yeah, it's called Stutzi. It's a small bar, but it's very good to work there. We attend a lot of people there. Unfortunately, we're not having these chairs because of the pandemic, because of the law. We cannot make cocktails for the people sitting in the bar. That's
a beautiful bar.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful bar, yeah. We used to be on the other side of the street. We just changed it because we didn't have space to put tables and chairs. So we just changed it to the other side of the street.
Are there lots of restrictions right now?
Yes.
Are there curfews like there are in Canada now?
I don't know in Canada, but here in Rio, it's kind of strange work because of the masks. We have to do the space between the tables. We have to use the face shield.
Are you seeing a lot of are a lot of bars and restaurants not even opening at all?
Here in Rio, everything is kind of normal, but in São Paulo, they have a problem with the hour. We can only open the bar until 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Here in Rio is until 1. So São Paulo, it's still a lot of places not working, and they probably won't open again.
Oh, that's tragic.
Yeah, that's tragic. My bar in São Paulo closed because it was impossible to keep paying the bills and paying the work staff without help of the government. So it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's a similar thing, happening around the world, and obviously that 10 p.m. closure thing is a killer. It's really difficult. Did you had some video?
In São Paulo, in São Paulo, the time was from 5 to 10. Who is going to drink at 5 p.m. every day on a Monday? So it's kind of tough.
Yeah, no kidding.
I have these videos of you, Carol. You want to walk us through what you're doing?
Yeah, I was just trying to show you how to do a caipirinha with how to cut the lime, probably the best way to use it. So just take the edges off. The best way probably to smash the fruit or whatever you're using. I don't know, any kind of fruits, fresh one, probably the best way to do it. So
straight from the source.
Yeah, straight from the source. So this is the cachaça. I use a simple syrup, probably around 20 mLs for a caipirinha.
Is that how bars are doing it now? Simple syrup instead of sugar?
Yes. It's much easier for us. I think it's safer if someone's just walked through you. Doesn't make a lot of bunch stuff drying on the surface. So probably for us it's much better.
Always dirty dump.
I had that debate last night at my bar. Someone ordered a caipirinha, and we were debating how to make it. And I was on the simple syrup.
Yeah, the problem with sugar, it's when you mix it, you drink at the edge will have just the sugar. So the first sip you have probably won't be as sweet as the last one. So it's what we call the crispy caipirinha because of the sugar. At the end, you're gonna just smell it and taste it. It's different, yeah.
Carol, I don't know if you know, but it's a bit of a bar side debate almost between bartenders, the subject of caipirinha and how to make it the authentic way. So that's why I was like really happy to see this. Like, oh no, down in Brazil they use sugar. Oh no, they don't dirty dump in Brazil. So
it's funny because there's no one way. You know, yeah. we actually had a presentation from Sasha on it, and he's like, he found it from his guide. He thought this was a way, and this other guy was like, actually, when it was made, it's made in the countryside. Nobody had ice. Nobody has shakers. So really, yeah. Like, what's the original? What are you even talking about? But yeah, I mean, I think dirty dump is probably, you could officially say, is the way to make it. There's obviously very different perspectives on sugar versus simple.
Not sugar. And there's a huge difference between the caipirinha made in Rio and the caipirinha made in São Paulo.
Oh, really?
The Rio, we shake it, yeah. In São Paulo, we don't shake it. São Paulo is just put the fruit in the glass, the ice, the caipirinha or the vodka, I don't know, and you just scoop the spoon on and just do it. You don't use the shaker.
That's asking people, do you want a Rio or a Sao Paulo caipirinha? That's how I'm gonna start asking people.
That's good.
Is that a source of?
I prefer the shaken one. I think it's better because of the ice, the dilution. I think it's better.
That's hilarious. Is that a source of pride almost between the two cities? Or like, you know, would you go and it's like, how dare you, you know, make my caipirinha like this? I'm in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, probably if a carioca go to São Paulo and see how the caipirinha is made, he won't ask for another one.
Yeah, carioca means somebody from Rio, and there's never not a reason to talk shit on each other about basically everything. Like,
it's great.
The rivalry goes deep. It's like New York and Boston.
Beyond the football. So then, obviously, the question is are there other styles with other? You know, Brazil's a big place. You know, does Brasilia have a different style? Is Salvador different?
In general, Brasilia, but
I think probably the best difference between is Rio and São Paulo. It's just, I don't know why.
That's awesome. And you had another cocktail, right?
I'll share it.
Yeah, the other video is not very fruity, but it's called Rabo de Galo. The translation would be the cocktail. It's made with a cachaça, 60 ml something, and Shinar. We used the Shinar 70 because I didn't have the regular one. And you just stir it, pour it into a glass, and use a fresh lime.
There's a lot of aperitivo and Italian bitter spirits used in South America for cocktails, period, right? So Cynar and Fernet and those sorts of spirits are quite popular down there. Is that right?
Quite popular, yeah.
Yeah, I love this.
We don't drink it just the beverage. We just mix it. So here it's kind of trendy, the Negroni. So everybody thinks they can change it, they can prove it different, mixed. So they trying to change the gin and the vermouth every time they ask for another drink. So they're always trying to, I don't know, taste everything.
Is there like a bartender guild or like a bar community in Brazil that is talking about these sorts of things, you know, different ways of making caipirinhas? Are they organized? Are you guys organized at all?
No. Not at all.
So what you're saying is you're going to start one.
Yeah, we have groups on the cell phone, like a WhatsApp group, so we can change recipes and everything. But just this way, it's not very formal.
Yeah, do you think it's important, like, you know, for the growth and more global recognition for Brazilian cocktail bartenders? Is that something that's on the agenda that people talk about at all?
I think it would be great for us as a bartender because of the professional part. So the regulation, the money and the salary and everything. But for the recipes and everything, it's just the informal which is working. So I don't know if it's going to change.
Yeah. Is there anything else you can tell us right now about what cocktail trends are in Brazil? If there's anything that's, you know, kind of taking off, both at the bartender level and the guest level, just generally speaking.
We're still at the gin vibe, so we're selling at all a lot of gin tonics. So a lot. They don't drink it; they just drink it. Gin tonic. So everything with tonic is working. Cachaça tonic, I think it's really good, and not everybody knows about it.
Is that
super fresh? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting. It's always good to talk about those simple cocktails as a gateway for you know, more complex ones down the way. I've actually never had a cachaça tonic, but why the heck not? So
it's really good. You should try.
Yeah,
Prata, and
with grapefruit slice, delicious.
Ooh.
Another one really good is that we're selling a lot. It's with coffee. So gin, coffee, and tonic we sell a lot.
That's awesome. That it's learn something new all the time. So hey, I realized I just looked at the time and we were running late, and we could do this for a while, but we should probably try and wrap things up pretty soon.
Hey John, I just want to clarify one thing for non-Portuguese speakers. So Rabo de Galo is a really rad classic that Carol showed us. You would spell
the second one.
Yeah, you would spell it for gringos, R-A-B-O, Rabo D-E Galo, G-A-L-O. So if anybody's looking for that, it's an awesome aged cachaça cocktail that's stirred. Coming into fall, it's a really good one. So just to clarify, kind of tough to interpret the pronunciation into English. It took a long time.
Maybe Pete, you can write it down on the chat for
I'll do it right now.
Yeah, for everyone else. So okay, that's interesting. Are you making a lot of batidas and other kind of bigger fruity cocktails at all, or in Brazil, or is it changing from through the seasons?
In specific bars like my bar, we don't do the batidas because I think it's too creamy and not everybody likes it. I do like it special. The passion fruit one and the coconut one, for me, they're the best ones. Mm-hmm. But probably the Brazilian, they drink it during June and July, which is our typical festivals. Mm-hmm. So we drink it a lot.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I said I could keep going on for a while. I think we should leave a little bit of room here for some questions and also, I promised that we'd give away a couple of bottles of Avuá Amburana as well. One quick question, actually, if you want to back up, Pete, this one's for you. It has to do with distillation and the uniqueness of cachaça being a single pot distillation, and how that actually makes it different than and that's by law, right? It has to be single. It's only one pot, or no, it's not?
No. This is, so that's the difference. It doesn't define distillation. It's just that artisanal cachaça, historically, by tradition, is a single pot distillation.
So you have two products. One's the Prata and one's the Prata still strength, right? And so I think to the untrained eye, you would think that the still strength would be like, oh, it hasn't been cut, or it hasn't been brought down to proof. But that's not the case. Do you want to elaborate?
Right, it's not the case. Yeah, so we basically start collecting earlier. So it's effectively a different cut, where we're collecting higher proof, higher ester elements earlier from the distillation. And so we're distilling to proof the Prata 84, or we're distilling to proof at 90 with the still strength. So it's amazing how different they are for anybody who's had the opportunity. It's really striking how different from an aromatic, body, and cocktail interaction standpoint they are, just being 3% difference. And one other anecdote is, our producer, we try to push her to go more, and basically like 90 proof was like the max she would let us have, because she wasn't happy with like it getting like even funkier and unstable effectively.
Yeah, I love it. Don't mess with ketchup.
Yeah, the boss says that's what we do.
Yeah. Let's give away a couple bottles of Avuá Amburana. So for those of you in Canada right now, we have the Prata still strength, the Amburana, the Balsamo, and the oak. So we'll give away a couple bottles of Amburana. And before we do that, I will say, I talk a lot with the government monopolies up here. One of the big challenges in terms of, getting more cachaça out there is the fact that there isn't a lot of people drinking cachaça, period, right now. And even those industrial cachaças, like the Cachaça 51s and the P2s and the stuff, that's not really, it's cachaça, but it's not really topically accurate, I think, for what cachaça is. And it confuses a lot of people, right? Because in their mind, they think cachaça is, all of a sudden something different than what it really is, because that's all they're seeing. Those aren't even selling either, right? And so, if you want to see more cachaça in Canada, period, that just means you have to go out there and drink more cachaça and get more involved in cachaça. It's the only way. So, Evan, maybe I'll let you be the guy who issues a couple trivia questions here. Sure. And so how we'll do it is, we'll give everyone a second, right? Reset. We're going to give away 2 bottles of Amburana.
Before we do that, I see Robin has a good question. Do you want to answer that or do the?
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Does cachaça have the same issues as agricole rums with ethyl carbonate levels? I don't even know if you do you know the answer to that, Pete?
I believe no, because I'm talking about artisanal cachaça, so single distillation pot still. We're at lower proof. We're a different effective cane material at lower proof out of a pot still. So I imagine, not knowing enough about agricole to say, but I imagine it has a lot to do with the distillation technique and the proof it comes out of the still.
For sure it does. Just to provide some context, Robin's in Ontario, and Ontario is the one province in Canada that has rigorous testing on EC levels. And
we're talking about the actual, like,
it actually roadblocks a lot of stuff, even whiskeys as well. EC levels. It's an old, archaic regulation that doesn't make any sense, that is only specific to Ontario. But yeah, Evan, I know people want to get going. Let's give away a couple bottles of Amburana. And so whoever's first on the chat to enter in we'll send you a couple bottles. And if you're outside of Canada, I'm sure Pete will be able to get you those Amburana, the delicious Amburana, the flagship, if you would.
Cool.
Evan.
So, yeah, get your key hands ready. So, Pete mentioned in the 17th and 18th century, much of the cachaça is produced in which town in the south of Brazil? And it is a two-part question. Where was it going?
Which town and where was it going? Oh my goodness. Not making it easy.
This was talked about a lot.
Fair. At least, yeah, you were paying attention. That's good. Wow, no one out there. Either that or everyone's racing to Google right now. The one by the water and then straight to the mines.
Okay. I'll let someone else can be the judge on this. There's at least a semi-answer from Keith there. So
yeah. Yeah, that's an accurate half answer.
What's the second? We need the second half of the answer,
that's
though,
the
don't
second
we?
half.
Where is it being produced? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, still no one. Okay.
Give it to him.
Yeah, maybe.
You want me to give the answer?
Yeah, I mean, if no one else, I can't. I don't have the chat screen open, so.
Yeah. The end. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. No, it was Parachi in the south of Brazil.
Parachi, yeah. It was in Rio State, so I guess Keith is still also.
All right, Keith,
yeah.
we'll get you a bottle of Amburana. You're the closest at all. But let's make the second one a little easier, maybe.
All right, just one. I just need one of the two resinous woods that we talked about. There we go. Robin.
Yeah. Oh.
Robin.
Yeah.
What?
Or no, wait.
Oh.
Or is it Chris is first?
Chris is first.
Well, because you had balsam on the slide.
Yeah, I did.
But balsam and balsamo two different.
Yeah, that was a typo.
woods?
But you can't blame anybody for that. That's my fault.
Okay.
You know?
I'm pretty sure balsam and balsamo are actually two totally different.
They are
different words.
But I did have it on the slide.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Let me fix the slide right now. I'm literally gonna fix it. I've been looking at it like, damn, I need to fix that, and then I forget.
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's probably a typo too. You wouldn't even notice it. Yeah, they are. So they are different woods. But Chris will get it. We'll get it to you. And you know what? We'll give a third bottle to Robin for actually.
There you go.
In there. Yeah, exactly. Everybody gets cachaça. Awesome. Well, I'm super impressed that we had such a high retention rate. I know there's so much Zoom fatigue that's happened. If there aren't any other questions, we will end things here. Hey, thank you so much. Next month, we're actually going to do something on with the guys from Siete Misterios on Day of the Dead traditions. We'll do it towards the end of October. The Day of the Dead in Mexico is the beginning of November. And then we'll see where we're going. We'll tally it up. Hopefully, we did a good job here raising some more funds and some more awareness for the Black Health Alliance, EGAL Canada. By the way, EGAL Canada, which promotes LGBTQ plus and Two-Spirit rights and issues. I'm not very articulate today. If you go onto their Twitter and their Instagram, they actually have a whole bunch of great workplace training resources right now, which I think is really important, especially coming back. All these workplaces are really, really different. And then, yes, the Native Women's Association of Canada. Don't forget to wear orange on September 30th. There's so much systemic racism happening right now, even in our coastal waters in Canada. And we really, really, obviously you want to continue to be using any platform possible to be raising awareness for that stuff. If you don't know what Orange Shirt Day is, please go look it up. It's really important. Even if you're not in Canada, please go look up what Orange Shirt Day is. It's now being taught to kindergarten kids in school in most of Canada. So, we're on our way with that. And if there's anything else, thank you so much. Lots of love. This is recorded and will show up on YouTube as well. And if you have any other questions about where to get Avuá or anything like that, slide into our DMs. Carol, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. We know we just met, and these things can be a little difficult. I really, really, really appreciate you giving us some insight from Brazil and taking some time. And I can't wait until we can all travel and go to Stutzy Bar and have a cachaça tonic and celebrate.
It'll be a pleasure.
and Pete, you are.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh yeah! Hey, listen, this wouldn't have happened without you, for sure. Otherwise, it would have just been Pete going on and on. And
Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that.
Pete, thanks again as always. And with that, I think probably a good time to sign off. And any other questions? Feel free go into the DMs or go to Sovereign Canada's Instagram or. And also follow Stutzy Bar on Instagram as well, and follow Carol's work so you can continue to see beautiful cocktails that are coming from Copacabana. All right, peace, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.